Hi. It's time perhaps for another little demonstration. And there is something that I had on my mind for quite a while recently. Something I have had on my mind all since I got to know about Buckminster Fuller, and synergetics, and found my own way into spherical thinking and spherical being. And it's got something to do with the way that people are looking at space-time in terms of the orientation of the structures of space-time that we are creating and very often constructing. The relationship between that and the ground, which is the great round of Earth. So I want to do this basically with almost the same, it's almost all the same type of structure. So it's, I hope, a little more clear. Hold on, I'm gonna get one more. Okay, picked another one up. Yeah, so I want to draw everyone's attention to this, which is what Bucky Fuller called the vector equilibrium. I called it the mother of all spheres for a long while. Now I much like to call it the 2008 eyes, because it's got 2008 triangles in it, which is 32 if you don't do dozens yet. Yeah, and this is a very fundamental and central structure in synergetics and in being universe, in the way that space-time is structured. It's got a lot to do with spheres, all to do with spheres. It's actually the relationships between the centers of a dozen spheres around one, which, yeah, I tend to, there's lots of videos already where I show these things and explain them. And yeah, anyways, before I explain what I do, I do have a model here just to show the spheres themselves. This is the same structure. In this case we have a dozen rock crystal sphere beads around one, and that's also a vector equilibrium, although this is really the closest drawn spheres of it, or I like to call them moons. And this is the same thing. This is the connections between the vectors, between the centers of the spheres in there. And as it spins, as you see here, that's kind of like this way of orienting. So there's, if you like, a vertical direction in the vectors there. See? And the moment that this comes to fall, to sit on the ground, now it's sitting this way. And I think this is the way this is the way that that almost all people seem to be thinking of this structure. They call it as the Archimedean solid that looks the same superficially. They call this a cube octahedron. So its main relationship is with the cube, because everything is considered by the cube, and I'm not going down that way now. If what I'm saying about this cube thing doesn't ring a bell with you yet, please, 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 please consider watching the video that I'm going to put in the description here to get a bit of a catch-up on Schrödinger's cat and why the box and all that. I keep repeating myself on that because it's so important that we speak about it, but it's also always in the way of what needs to be said. And what I want to say about this now, which is why I show this, why I've been doing this, is that as this structure has come to sit down like this, this is the main way in which I see almost all people using and applying structures of synergetic kind, whether they are familiar with synergetics as such and know about these relationships, or indeed they're doing what in conventional engineering is called space frames, for instance, which is related to this. But it's all looked at by the means of the cube that's sitting on a square, because people think there's a square there, but it's not. The square in there is a gap between the triangles. Here, let me show you a bit of a higher frequency of that structure. Like this is the nucleus of that, and if one were to, do that way, if one were to grow it out, I have a nucleus for it anyways. If one grows the structure of the vector equilibrium out a little, one gets to this place, and this does what the small one does too. If the nucleus is removed, it dances. See? And you can see how that supposed square that people make out here isn't really there. It's just a gap between the triangles. And that gap allows for movement, which is very good to know and to have and to, to do, four-legged as we are. So the square isn't really there. And it's not really there in this case, and much less the moment we get to higher frequencies, meaning more complex structures of these kinds. Okay, so bear with me. This one, if I complement it with 6 more spheres, it grows into this one here. Up. Now this is a 2-frequency 8 ice, and as it comes to sit like this, one can see that it's just sitting on a triangle. So in this case here, I already instinctively turned it, because I like to have it sit on the triangle rather than the square, just like I have put this one. Because you can see that, one can see if I put it this way, yes, there is a perceivable spherical, is that a word? I don't think so. A spherical arrangement of vectors in here and on the bottom there. So it does, one could come to the idea, I don't know why they would, but people have in the terminology of solids to think of this as a solid, where it's 8 triangles and 6 squares making up this solid. And in that case, there would be a surface here of whatever kind we do make it. If we realize this as a thing, then we would maybe make it of cardboard or whatever, and we would have a square there, most likely. If it weren't there, the thing would move. As there is none here, it does move. Because it's an equilibrium, which is to say it's balancing, but that is an activity. It's a being, it's a way of being in balance, which is to say between one and another. When, the balance isn't this static extreme in the middle, but it's between these two, the dancing back and forth, right? So when I put the vector equilibrium, which is the nuclear system of synergetics, it's also the geometry of zero, but that's a topic for another day. When I put it instead of the square side on the triangle, what I do get, very really present, concrete, actual, factual, whatever we want to call it, present now, is a triangle on the ground and a triangle on the top, and there's 6 triangles on the middle in the equator, horizon. Yeah. Okay, so when I turn this thing this way, I don't really have anything, any planes there. Right, if I were to make this a house, then I would need to put in solid floors and the squares, and I wouldn't really have anything to go on there much. If I turn it this way, I do have indeed triangles, a whole floor of them, and not just 1 or 2, but 6, which gives a hexagon, which is quite a lot of room. And as I show you here, one can see that the way that if I put it on the square, looks like that, yes? And if I complement it with the corners here, that would look like this. And that's the way most people think of the shape of the 8 eyes, which they call the octahedron. They think of it in terms of 2 pyramids sitting on one another, because we've been brainwashed, brain frozen by centuries and millennia of the presence of these pyramids, and they have a very, very strong hold on everyone's imagination. Even though, again, if I hadn't had the whole structure here, the whole being, there wouldn't be no squares. It would be a moving thing. And I could show you that, but I'm not gonna grab yet another toy for that. Well, I can show you here in a way, because the half of this, that's that corner I spoke of, half of that like so, and how that is actually moving. Yeah, that's a lower frequency of the same thing again, and this time with a nucleus which can be removed, and then it dances more. But one can see that that pyramid, that supposed pyramid, is not a solid either. It's a gap in the fabric of space-time, basically. It's nothingness. So where does that leave us? Where am I headed with this? Now, people do like to look at the 8 eyes in this way, because that's also the way it is caught up in the cube. It's the very way that space-time is manifest in every single one of our homes and houses that we consider to be normal. But this one, it doesn't want to sit that way. Only if I spun it, then it would be turning that way, because that's precession. It's a moving body in relation to a moving body, which is the Earth. And the moment this moving body comes to rest, it sits on a triangle, like this. And again, we have a triangle on the bottom, we have a triangle on the top, and both are real. They actually give us a plane of something real to play with. And we can play on with that, because I can show you a few more constellations with those vector equilibria that I've recently grown. So here's a 4 eyes out of 4 vector equilibria. This one also can move. See the equators of these 4 bubbles, they can actually spin. They are still dancing, but the whole thing together makes 4 vector equilibria, 4 spheres give 4 eyes. And looking at that, in the middle there is an 8 eyes as a gap between 4 of these smaller 4 eyes. So it's actually a fractal, 2 frequency fractal of the 4 eyes in so many ways. There's so many ways of fractality in this very thing. But again, no squares. See, all of those are dancing. It's only the constellation of all of them together that can hold the 8 eyes in the middle between them. That's the only full 8 eyes in there. As a gap between 4 eyes. And that one is stable. That one isn't moving. All the other ones here that are half, those do move. Move, move, move. Not square. But again, if we are putting our perception of what we call space on this basis, on the square base, if I do the same with this, it looks like that. And granted, it looks pretty, no question about that. But again, we don't have actual planes there. There is a bunch of parent squares, these on the bottom here, and then there's those, and then, but none of them are present as anything other than the sides of triangles that are actually there. Whereas, if it's allowed to sit this way, we do have, again, a whole lot of triangular planes that are present and actual and make up give a lot of room. And in this case, if it stands this way around, it's sitting on 4 eyes. And no, sorry, 3 triangles. 1, 2, where am I? 1, 2, and 3. Those 3 eyes. And all the rest, which is a lot, that are planar, that are like floors in a house, they are all above that, removed from the ground, but still level. Now if I turn it around this way, it's sitting on 1 eye, and it's got all those, like this is 4 hexagonal planes. That's 4 times 6 triangles, which is 2 dozen eyes, plus a few more in the middle. That's 2 dozen plus eyes, more than 24 triangles of actual area, if we wanted to think of it that way. None of that is available if we turn it on the square side, which isn't even a square. Then we don't have any triangle that is level with the ground. Here is an 8 eyes from Vector Equilibria, and I'm so happy about this one. I love it. I love them all, to be honest. But this is a more recent one also. That's what I grew after the 4 eyes. So this is 6 Vector Equilibria, 6 2 dozen 8 eyes, and they are complementing one another in the very way that we would have the 6 spheres of the 8 eyes here. So the centers of these are all sitting on the corners of this one. And indeed in the middle of this we have a hollow which is surrounded by the membrane of this, because in the middle there would be room for one more of those nuclei, but it's not present. So in the middle of this thing there's a very big room, very big room. It's a, well, 2 dozen 8 eyes, I think. I don't even know, I haven't counted, but this thing has a whole lot of volume in it. Whole lot. This is a very big thing. And it's just in the middle there. It's a gap between these spheres. And by having it sit this way, as it would naturally if it's in a relationship of rest with the ground, the great round of Earth. If it does sit like this, 3 spheres on 3 spheres, well, see how there's now 6 hexagonal planes of triangles present in this, sitting on 3 triangles. That's wild. That's like a, I don't know, that's like a big house, a very big house if you ask me. And watch what happens if I turn it on the square. Ooh, now it looks like the way that people like to think of this, the pyramid scheme, pyramid on pyramid. And again, that would be a preferred way of it to spin. But if it's sitting like this, let us count the number of triangles that are plane and level with the ground. There's exactly none. Not a single triangle that is level with the great round of Earth. Even though this entire structure consists entirely of triangles. Because triangle is structure and structure is triangle. Hold on. Okay. We were here looking at the way that this is now a whole lot of nothingness in relationship to the ground. Every single actual physical structure of space-time in here is now out of tune in a way with regard to Earth. It's all turned on a tip. And by doing that, all of these square gaps are level with the ground. But we have no access, no reasonable, useful access to the actual planes of the four planes of space-time that are making this entire thing, making up this entire body, this entire structure. The entire thing is nothing but a space-time tensegrity with beats on a string. The entire thing is triangles, and not a single one of them is in a useful relationship with the ground. Much unless this way. If it's this way, not all of the triangles are plane with the ground because it's 4 planes. So out of those 4, only a single plane is level. That's what I like to call the equator. But that is only just in this one. This is if we're only counting the hexagonal planes in there, so the middle layers of those vector equilibria, there's 6 of them. 6 times 6 is 3 dozen triangles, 3 dozen eyes, plus a couple more here and there. Now that, to me, it's one of the reasons why I love the work of Tom, what was his name? It's been a year. In the beginning of this year, which is now coming to a close, we had the 52 Living Ideas feature a geometer, Tom, and I lost his last name for the time being. And the way that he was aligning his entire geometric framework when he explained it to me, or to us, I immediately saw that what he was doing was this. His stuff is way complex, you know. He's using the so-called Platonic solids and has created his own kind of synergetic perspective on all of those. And, you know, if it were for me, I have no reason, I have no need for cubes and dodecahedra other than knowing them as transforms, and they do come in handy in that way. But as they aren't solids, they aren't structures, they are constructs. If we want to realize them, we have to put in triangulation, making them constructs. And just watching that, see him realize or organize his framework on the basis of precession, but going off the radial axis of Earth precessionally to then open up the triangles. That's this. Here is another fractal. This is the fractal of a dozen 8 eyes around one. So it's the same as this one, but where this has beats, every one of them a sphere, this one has an 8 eyes for every one of those. And look, it's all the triangles level with the ground again. Whereas if it's turned on the square, there's not a single triangle level ground. And I mean, that may not matter to many people because they're all living their lives in the condition of the square supremacy of solids and static space and linear time, and it's doing them no good, if you ask me. I can see that the world is suffering from this illusion. But see, the way that I live my life, I've been doing everything since I learned about this in this orientation of my mind, in this mindset. And everything I'm doing now is around triangles, as you may notice. And if I want to create a structure like this and have it, you know, be a house, for instance, just see how easy it would be to put it up so that in case the, let's say the water, we've got a bit of a sea level rise. What do? No problem, we just add tripods to our houses. Same way I can use this to make a house, a table or a chair or something like that. 3 legs always sit however uneven the ground because they come with a plane that they provide by their 3 points. So, you know, it's worthwhile to mind the triangles and to have them actually present in our living relationships with kinship Earth and the whole of life, and, you know, really inhabit this relationship and be in tune with our being wholeness and live and dance alongside one another with all our kin. And it's really easy, it's just that little twist of the mind. Never mind the squares, they're not there, they're gaps between triangles, so let's focus in on those and make such good use of their beauty and brilliance and, yeah, peace.